get into what we're here for today. So for people that don't know you, um, at O'Day or outside of O'Day, how would you explain yourself?
Well, I work at Benbridge. I sell jewelry, mainly Rolex. That's like my favorite thing to do. I'm an avid gym goer and, I try to focus on, bettering myself every day. The motto that I really stand by, and one of my buddies at Seattle U introduced me to this motto was 1% better every day. So, when you wake up, you get to it, you do something in life that's going to make you feel better, make you better off the next day, whatever it might be, whether it's making money, something for your health, something for your mind, it doesn't matter. So, I try to be a positive influence in kind of a negative world. I feel like, a lot's going on and a lot of people are, kind of sad and angry nowadays. And I kind of have trained myself to be like a positive light in like a dark world. So,
Come on.
I don't know. I try to, whether I know you or not, I'm always gonna I try to be the guy to give good advice or, lend a hand. Sometimes, I'm a tall guy, so sometimes I can be intimidating, but, I might consider myself somewhat of a friendly giant.
Most definitely.
But me and Jimmy, we met at the gym actually. Um, we were lifting there one day, a health club, and he's an outgoing guy, I'm an outgoing guy. Somehow we clicked, and then when I went to O'Day, before when I was going in my freshman year, they always talked about the O'Day Brotherhood, and I didn't really know what that meant. But once I graduated, I it started to appear more and more in my life. So, I met Jimmy, and once he said he went to O'Day, it was like instant. Like that was my bro, just like that.
Dude,
And
that's low, bro.
and we've been lifting together, on and off for the last 3 years. I've seen him grow a lot. And another example of that
Bro,
is
we've seen each other grow a lot.
we have. I was a
You
little
went from you
170.
went you were 170, now almost 200. You also went from South Center Benbridge to now or not South Center, downtown Benbridge to South Center Benbridge.
No, so not Nordstrom downtown. So
Nordstrom downtown. Whoa.
so my life has been a roller coaster for sure, but it's definitely, it's definitely growing and getting better by the years. So I started at Nordstrom, and it's actually funny. I have another O'Day kind of story. So when I was working at Seattle U, I um I was working at Nordstrom at like, this easy job, super easy, just
Yeah.
something to do while I was, in school to make some money.
What were you
And
doing in Nordstrom? Were you selling jewelry or were you in men's department? What were you doing?
no, so I was in the back room, like I was doing web fulfillment, like super easy, like the easiest job I ever had.
Come on now.
And it's actually funny. I met another guy who was older. I met a couple guys at Nordstrom actually that once, I started talking to them and found out they went to O'Day, it was the same thing. We like clicked immediately. And, playing back into that brotherhood, it's like, when you're out here in this world and you come across an O'Day bro, whether he's in school or graduated, it's almost an instant connection. So, people who have gone to O'Day know what that means and they know what that feels like. So, I worked there for about 4 years, just like worked my way up. I went from just a little, 18, 19-year-old web picker going to school to, by the time I was a senior, I was like the number one person on the team that management relied on. Now, I never went into management, but it was like, if they needed something done, they would just call me.
Call you. Yeah.
And then, opportunity arises everywhere. You just have to take it. So, while I was, on that team, I built a lot of good relationships with people, including the jewelry manager at downtown Nordstrom. And so when one of my friends who was working in the department said that they were planning to leave and they were like, basically, they put their 2 weeks in. I went up to the jewelry manager and I was like, hey, like, what do you think about taking me on to join the team? And I was pretty outgoing. I had definitely grown out of my shell a lot
Yeah.
because I was pretty introverted at O'Day. I was definitely not on the outgoing.
Yeah, we'll get
Uh,
into that too.
yeah. All right. Well, um, anyways, got into jewelry. Basically, like 2 weeks after she had left, I was in jewelry, and I worked there for a couple years, and then I wanted to elevate a little bit, so I was, you know, the thing of this is all about connections, right? Life is about connections and being open and knowing people. So fortunately, my mom used to work at the South Center Mall, and she would go into that Benbridge all the time and chat with the team and buy stuff, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes things are meant to be. One day I was thinking about leaving Nordstrom and going down to Benbridge and talking to the manager, and
Yeah, and it all aligned. It all worked out.
well, the stars really aligned because literally one day, it was probably like a weekend, I was like, you know what, this week on my off day, I'm gonna go down there and talk to him. I'm gonna just pop in, like not even tell
I
him.
remember you doing that.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm gonna pop in there, not gonna say a word, I'm gonna just go in and see what happens. And this is a blessing from God. But literally the day before I went down there and talked to the manager, she called me randomly on the phone and was like, "Hey, your mom's been hyping you up a lot.
It's
Like,
lost.
I want
It's
to meet
lost.
you." And
It's lost.
I was like, "Julie, that's insane. I literally was planning to come down tomorrow and like meet you." And so, I went down there. We talked for like 45 minutes. We absolutely hit it off. And, at the end of the conversation, she was like, "Well, it's a no-brainer. If you want the job, you got it." So, I gave my Nordstrom job about one more month, but I had basically already committed.
Yeah.
And then May of 2024, I started at Benbridge, and it's been a great time, honestly.
Yeah, man. Come on now. So, how would you explain your experience at O'Day? Because you kind of said you were a little bit of a introverted kid, and then you kind of broke out of your shell once you got into like that kind of sales job. So, what was your experience like at O'Day? Because you said you still had that brotherhood, and you noticed the brotherhood. You definitely noticed it when you were at school, but you noticed it a lot more when you were outside of school. So, what was that experience like?
I mean, O'Day was phenomenal. I think being around majority of dudes really kind of strengthens your mentality. You don't get intimidated as much by I think life as you get older, you can be intimidated, or life can be intimidating, right? So, when you're around a bunch of competition all the time, it kind of builds you for life. So, um, I mean, my experience at O'Day was 10 out of 10. Like I said, I wasn't the most social person, but everyone that I became friends with, I'm still friends with. I'm still in touch with a lot of my classmates. Those are friendships for life. Um, I tried. It's funny. I tried. I tried to play freshman football, and I was the scrawny little guy. And the first practice, I got injured, and so I was out for like 2 weeks. And then,
See,
and
were
then,
you really injured, or did Dean threaten you guys with some circuits, and you just said, "Nah, I don't want to do it today,"
no, I
or
actually, I actually messed something up, and then so I was out for 2 weeks. I was still going to the practices, but I was just like injured, wasn't even doing nothing, right? And
yeah,
then And then literally like the second or like 2, 3 weeks after I recovered, the first practice back, I literally I slipped on something, and I basically destroyed my ankle again, and I took that as a sign to probably quit. So I remember uh I remember being in history class and Dean coming
hey,
to the
football is not for all of us, man.
I mean, I was like 5'4", like 120 at the time.
Oh,
I had
that was my area right there.
I had a lot of I had a lot of growing that took place. I grew about 4 inches my freshman year, and then I grew another 4 inches senior year. So it was a good time, but you know, I got injured and I was like too short to hoop and it didn't work out, right? I'll never forget when Dean came to my class in history and he pulled me out in the hall and he was like, "So you gonna play football or not?" And I was like,
No,
"Dean,
I
I got
can't.
injured, 2 practices, 2 injuries. I'm out."
I'm
And
cooked.
and I remember just that was a tough to admit, but I
Yeah,
think it was the right decision. I don't know. I
the
was
right
never
move.
really built for football.
It is what it is. Well, what were a couple things that Ode taught you, or some things that stuck out during your time at Ode that you still hold on to today?
I think Mr. Karate is one of those people who taught me
Ooh,
something crazy, and I still remember it. But he stressed the importance of a Roth IRA. You know, as like
yeah,
a young man, once you turn 18 and you start making some money, start throwing that into a Roth IRA. It's you know, it's an individual retirement
no,
account.
yeah, he's just looking out for the younger generation.
I mean, it's like once you start making some money, you're gonna want to spend it on stupid stuff. And if
Exactly.
you can hold yourself back and really start investing in yourself at a young age, you will be so much better off later in life. So that was one thing. Another thing that oh, what was his name? Greenan, Mr. Greenan. I'll never forget. One of the things he said was, and this was senior year. This was like a world government or you know one of those kind of government
Yeah,
classes. But I remember him saying he said there's only two kinds of conversations that could destroy a friendship, so beware. Anything about politics or religion. And you know, as I've gotten older, I've actually, you know, had some of those kind of experiences
and
where
it's kind of true.
you know I've disagreed with somebody in some way shape or form and you know they feel some type of way about it and you know I basically have probably lost a couple friends because of it. Now I'm not hurt about it, but you know you have to live life is like a test and you know you're going to pass or fail. At the end of the day you're going to learn. So
Exactly.
whether you're graded on it or not, it's just you know that's how life is, and it's trial and error. Don't be afraid. Just send it, you know. But at O'Day, I mean, you know, your brothers are important. They gotta build you up. You gotta stay focused on the right things. Stay athletic for sure. You know, prioritize your health. And just go after it.
Come
No
on.
fear.
So how did Ode impact your decision making for after high school?
I mean, honestly, I didn't apply to a lot of schools going out of, you know, O'Day, and so Seattle U was one of my options. And I have some history, some family history there, so that was kind of like a meant to be
Yeah,
scenario. Um, and you know, I think I never really lifted or you know was really on that health journey until about my sophomore year at Seattle U. And you know I encountered a group of you know these young dudes who were you know they were cool, they were smart, and they were you know doing things that I kind of wanted to get into, but I wasn't really around it. So you know I made the decision to you know I put my foot forward and was like, yo, you know, like I want to start going to the gym with you guys and like hanging
yeah,
out. You know, I want to you know I want to better myself. I'm not hanging around the best group of people right now. So I kind of saw O'Day in that like little group of homies that I had, or group of friends rather, and you know, one of my buddies is still like one of my best friends to this day. He lives down in Florida, but he kind of showed me the ropes on fitness and you know, taking care of myself. We played a lot of basketball and you know all that kind of stuff. So I kind of you know, I learned that I would say I learned it from O'Day to some degree because although I wasn't like lifting and doing, you know, the right thing, I would say when I was at O'Day in terms of like my health and stuff, I kind of saw that in others at Seattle U and
yeah.
was like, all right, like this is the group that I want to be around. These are the people who are actually working hard. So it kind of like clicked in me that it's like, um, you know, your health's important and it's you know, once you hit a certain age, it's really hard to get to where you want to be. So, I kind of jumped on that. And you know, when you have a strong body, you got a strong mind. So, I kind of my freshman year, I kind of had a lot of fun and, was out and about doing a lot. But once I started taking care of myself a little bit more, I kind of woke up, started doing
Yeah.
better in school, and just life got better. So, um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, how did you get into the jewelry industry? Because you studied finance. Like, have you always been into jewelry? Was it always something that you kind of wanted to get into? Because you kind of touched on how, like, yeah, the opportunity kind of just presented itself where one of your coworkers was stepping away. But did you always have like an eye set on jewelry? Or was it kind of like something that you always admired?
I didn't really care too much for jewelry at first. My whole mindset was increasing my income. So, at Nordstrom, it's like there's a couple jobs which jewelry is included in that it's sales, right? So,
Yeah,
you get paid on commission for how much you sell. So there's a couple departments in that downtown store that were phenomenal departments if you could get into them. Now, most of them required sales experience, but like I said, I built those relationships and kind of proved myself as an outgoing person who could like talk that um I could do it. And
yeah,
so, that opportunity in jewelry arose and I took it because I knew that it was going to, increase my income and help me kind of sharpen my skills in terms of like talking and selling because if you look at it, all the wealthy people in the world, they sell something.
yeah,
You know, they sell stuff and that is I think one of the most important skills is learning how to sell, whether it's yourself, whether it's some jewelry, any kind of
exactly.
item. Sales is like um, one of the most high income earning jobs. A lot of people I followed online kind of stressed, getting into sales at a young age because that really sharpens your skills on how to communicate with people and how to sell things. And as you get older, I hope that I can sell higher ticket stuff.
Exactly. That's the
And
goal.
and that's the goal, right? And ever since I got into jewelry, I mean, year after year, I've gotten better at it. And even now that I'm at Benbridge, it's like I work with some people who have been in the industry, longer than 20 years, and I'm outperforming them.
Yeah,
So, I like finance was like a good gig to get into because finance is everywhere.
yeah,
But, I always kind of pictured myself more as like a sales guy than a guy sitting behind a desk working on, worksheets and stuff like that. I respect that to a degree, but I like to be out in the world. I like to meet people. At Benbridge, I've met a lot of successful people, a bunch of CEOs, bunch of vice presidents, a bunch of people in kind of all different walks of life,
yeah.
and I think
NFL
that's
players.
cool, and that builds on connections. I got a lot of people who check in with me basically on a weekly basis. I talk to people all the time. I just had a phenomenal experience after the Super Bowl. I sold a Rolex to Uchenna Nwosu, who got the pick six in the fourth quarter to secure the game. I mean, like,
Come on.
how often are you meeting people who have those kind of connections? I was blessed with the opportunity. I met him back in August, and we kind of built that relationship over time.
And now you're
And
just continuously building it.
yeah, and so I delivered, an extremely hard watch to him. It was a phenomenal experience. He's a very humble guy, and that's kind of what I mean by like sales is like a realm that you're just going to meet some of the coolest, most outgoing people. And in reality, when you think about it, the coolest people that you kind of encounter in life are the most outgoing,
Yeah.
best communicating kind of people. They're kind of goofy and just all over the place, and that's why it's important to, build that confidence and, be cool. Life's all about being cool.
So, did you learn anything specifically at O'Day that you can apply into the jewelry industry? It could be very niche. It could be very like it could be something somebody said. Um, it
I
could be
mean,
anything.
I mean, it's like at O'Day, it's a big sports realm,
Yeah,
and I encountered all types of out at O'Day. The gamers, the sports guys, the readers, the whatever you want to call it, right? So, kind of chatting with all different kinds of people prepared me for the
that
real
the
world.
diversity of the real world.
Yeah, because I mean, how do you connect with people? Well, you can't just be focused on one thing. You kind of have to be knowledgeable in all realms
You
of
have to
life,
be well
right?
rounded. Yeah,
So, a guy comes in with a Seahawks hat, I can talk about the Seahawks or the Mariners or whatever. A guy comes in with a Call of Duty hoodie, like I can talk about Call of Duty,
all day.
all day. So it's just, I think being around that different group of people and all those kind of different interests really sharpened and expanded my interests. And so it's important to kind of dabble in all walks of life. Don't be stuck in one place. Try new things. Read, game a little, talk to girls, go out, do things, like have fun. That's what life's about. Experience life. Don't be stuck in a bubble.
Yeah. Well, would you have anything else that you would want to say to people about what you do? Um, Anything like that?
I mean, I think the most important thing is like, sharpen your skills at a young age, invest in yourself, set goals. Um, don't be afraid to fail. I think a lot of those things are obvious and a lot of people know those things in the back of their mind, but when it comes to actually applying it to the real world, a lot of
They
people
don't.
never do.
Yeah.
So, a lot of my success in life has come, on the back of failure. So, go out there and, conquer the world. Don't be afraid. Obviously, the people who you really want to be around are going to support you win or lose. And the people who, you probably don't want to be around are going to be, hating. So, strengthen your circle, stick around people who are solid, that share the same goals, travel the world. Don't be afraid um, to go somewhere alone. One of my biggest regrets was, um, going to school, but not really leaving the city.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest growth factors as a young man is once you graduate from O'Day, go somewhere by yourself, go to a new school somewhere out of state, and kind of just take on the world by yourself.
Experience a new location.
Obviously you got a phone, you can call people if you're feeling, down
I'm
or
sick.
whatever. But a lot of
Whatever.
these schools have programs where they, introduce you to people, and you'll meet a friend immediately. Like literally my first day during orientation at Seattle U, a guy made a joke about, the TV show South Park, and now he's one of my best friends and he's getting married in August and I'm going to his wedding in Maine. So um embrace life and get after it. Go somewhere new.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you getting on here, doing the call. I understand you're a very busy guy, usually taking the closing shifts and stuff like that. So I appreciate you cutting the time out, and doing this call. Um, we'll have to get a lift in soon, most definitely. Um, well, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one, gentlemen.
Thanks for having me.